I always thought Grandma June would live forever. She had that stubborn kind of life, the kind that outlasted logic, medicine, and even time itself. Even in her 80s, she still wore her silk gloves to church, drove her old Cadillac like she was racing ghosts, and never once admitted to feeling tired. So when I got the call saying she'd passed peacefully in her sleep, something in me refused to believe it. Maybe it was denial. Maybe it was the guilt of not visiting as often as I should have. But I felt something else too, a deep, cold curiosity about what she might have left behind. Before we continue, thank you for being here. If you're new, please hit that subscribe button, tap like, and tell me in the comments, what would you do if your grandmother's will turn into a trap for your entire family? The funeral had been small, polite, and oddly hollow. My cousins and I stood like strangers at the graveside, each one pretending to mourn while secretly doing math in their heads. I could see it in their eyes. Jeremy, the self-proclaimed businessman, had already decided how to reinvest his share. Lila was thinking about the designer purse she'd post on Instagram next week. And Stephen was just angry that Grandma hadn't died sooner. He'd always been like that, impatient, entitled, and mean in ways that didn't always show until they did. I was different, or at least I liked to think I was. Grandma and I had been close once. I used to spend summers at her house, helping her in the garden, feeding her dog Winston, listening to her stories about how she'd built the family business from nothing. You watch people's eyes, not their words, she'd say, trimming her roses. That's how you find out who's real. At the time, I thought she was just being dramatic. I didn't know those words would come back like prophecy. When Mr. Langford, her attorney, called to schedule the will reading, he sounded peculiar. Your grandmother was a very deliberate woman, he said. She left specific instructions. Everyone needs to be there. His voice carried something between warning and weariness. He didn't elaborate, and I didn't ask. The day of the reading, the sky was gray and heavy, the kind that seemed to press against the windows of Langford and Shaw Legal Associates. We all gathered in the conference room, a sleek, sterile place that smelled faintly of coffee and cold ambition. Jeremy arrived first, wearing his fake sympathy smile. You holding up okay? He asked, but his eyes flicked straight to the folder on the lawyer's desk. Lila followed, dressed in black silk, more for fashion than grief. She hugged me perfunctorily, whispering, "You look exhausted." Then came Stephen, late, loud, and chewing gum. "Let's get this over with," he muttered, dropping into his chair like he owned the place. Mr. Langford entered moments later, tall and meticulous, carrying a large brown envelope. His suit was pressed, his voice calm, but there was a heaviness to his movements that set my nerves on edge. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Mrs. Whitmore's will is rather unconventional." Jeremy chuckled. "Of course it is. The woman left half her estate to a dog once, didn't she?" The room laughed, except for me and the lawyer. Mr. Langford's lips pressed into a thin line. "You may want to hold your comments until you hear the full document," he said. He began to read, "I, June Whitmore, being of sound mind and spirit, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. To my loyal dog Winston, who never betrayed my trust, I leave the entirety of my estate, property, and financial assets." The room fell silent for a full 5 seconds, then erupted. "You've got to be kidding me," Stephen barked. The dog. Lila's laugh came out sharp and shrill. "That's insane." Jeremy leaned forward. "Is this a joke? That's not legal, right? You can't actually leave everything to an animal." "Mr. Langford didn't flinch. "It's perfectly legal, as long as a trustee is named." He continued reading. "The trustee will oversee Winston's care and management of the estate. Should Winston pass before the estate is exhausted, remaining assets will be distributed according to further instructions." Jeremy scoffed. "Further instructions? So what? They might get a mansion and a trust fund." I didn't speak. My eyes drifted to the photograph on Mr. Langford's desk, a small, framed picture of Grandma and Winston sitting on her porch. She looked happy there, the kind of happy that came from knowing something nobody else did. My stomach twisted. She planned this. Every word of it. Mr. Langford folded the document carefully and cleared his throat. That concludes the reading of the written will. However, Mrs. Whitmore left one final message to be played immediately after. Lila rolled her eyes. What is this, a movie? But I knew Grandma better than any of them. If she left a recording, it wasn't sentimentality. It was strategy. And judging by the tremor in Mr. Langford's hand as he reached for the old-fashioned tape recorder, I had a feeling that whatever she was about to say would change everything. He pressed play. A moment of static filled the room. Then her voice, clear and sharp, cut through the silence. If you're listening to this, Grandma said, it means Winston's still alive, and so are my secrets. The laughter stopped, and just like that, the real will began. The sound of her voice froze us all. I swear the temperature in that room dropped the second she spoke. Grandma's voice had that unmistakable tone, sweet calm, but sharp enough to slice through bone when she wanted it to. If you're listening to this, she said, her voice crackling faintly through the old recorder, then it means I'm finally gone. Winston's probably wagging his tail somewhere, and all of you are sitting there wondering how a dog ended up richer than you. For a second, nobody breathed. Then Jeremy snorted. She's joking. This is part of her crazy humor. But Mr. Langford didn't look amused. He folded his hands tightly, his jaw twitching slightly. The recording continued. I've lived long enough to see my family become strangers. You all stopped visiting years ago, except when you needed something. Money for tuition, help with bills, someone to complain to about each other. Not when you asked how I was doing. Her voice wavered slightly, then steadied again. I wasn't angry about it. Not first. People grow up. They move on. But then I started noticing how you treated each other when I wasn't around. How quickly love turns into competition when money is involved. Lila shifted uncomfortably, crossing her legs and forcing a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. She's exaggerating, she muttered, but even she sounded unsure. Grandma's voice deepened, carrying that old, commanding tone that used to stop us in our tracks as kids. I decided a long time ago that I wouldn't let greed rot this family any further. So, I did what I always do when I suspect a lie. I watched. I listened. And I took notes. Stephen frowned. Notes? What does that mean? The recording paused briefly. Then a new sound emerged. Footsteps, a faint shuffle, and then a sigh. Jeremy, she said. His name hit like a slap. He blinked, straightened, and forced a smirk. Oh, here we go, he muttered. Jeremy, Grandma continued, I know about the money you stole from the family business. The missing $18,000 you blamed on an accountant. I didn't say anything because I wanted to see if guilt would make you confess. It didn't. It only made you cleverer. You used your cousin's trust fund to hide your tracks, didn't you? Jeremy's smirk collapsed. He turned pale. That's not true, he stammered. Lila and Stephen turned to stare at him. You did what? Lila hissed. Jeremy's hands shook slightly. She's making it up. She was old, probably confused. But Grandma wasn't done. Lila, she said, the name rolling off her tongue like a blade. Lila stiffened. You always cared about appearances more than people. Remember that time you called me to apologize for missing my birthday? You said you were stuck in traffic. Funny thing, I checked your Instagram that day. You were in Miami. And Stephen, well, you were there too, weren't you? Stephen clenched his jaw. What does that have to do with anything? He snapped. Grandma chuckled, a low, knowing sound that made the hairs on my arms rise. It has everything to do with it, darling. You both thought I was too old to notice how often you borrow my car without asking, or how you accidentally charge your weekend trips to my card. I let you, because I was curious. How far would you go? Lila's face turned red. This is insane, she muttered. She's attacking us from a grave. Maybe we deserve it, I said quietly, almost to myself. The room turned toward me. Jeremy glared. Oh, shut up, Oliver. You always thought you were the favorite. Maybe I was. Or maybe I just hadn't given her as many reasons to hate me. Still, I said nothing. My heart was hammering as the tape crackled again. Oliver, Grandma said next. My breath caught. You're sitting there thinking you're the exception. You're not. You disappointed me in your own way. The words hit harder than I expected. You spent so much time trying to please everyone that you forgot to stand for something. You saw your cousins lie, cheat, and manipulate, and you said nothing. You called it peacekeeping, I call it cowardice. A hollow silence filled the room. I felt my chest tighten, a strange mix of guilt and shame swirling inside me. She wasn't wrong. I'd stayed quiet. I'd always stayed quiet. Then her tone softened, just slightly. But I haven't forgotten what you used to be. The boy who helped me in the garden, who listened instead of talked. Maybe that boy's still there, buried under everything else. Maybe he'll be the one to fix what's left of this family. Lila laughed bitterly. Fix the family? Grandma, you left everything to a dog. As if on cue, Winston barked outside the door. It was faint but perfectly timed, echoing like a punchline. Grandma chuckled on the tape. Oh, don't worry. Winston won't be living in luxury for long. You see, the will you've just heard, the one about the dog, isn't the full story. That was the decoy. Mr. Langford adjusted his glasses nervously, glancing at me, then the others. There's a second document, Grandma continued, and only one person in this room knows where to find it. I left a clue in the house, the one you all stopped visiting. It's hidden where I spent my happiest days, and whoever finds it first will know who truly deserves what I left behind. The tape clicked, then silence. Stephen leaned forward. Is that it? Mr. Langford nodded slowly. That's all she left. The rest of her instructions are sealed until someone finds the second document. Jeremy stood abruptly. So what? It's a treasure hunt now. He laughed sharply. That old woman's playing games. But deep down I knew better. Grandma June didn't play games. She made lessons. And this one wasn't over. I looked out the window, picturing her old house, the creaking porch, the smell of roses, the quiet hum of secrets waiting under the floorboards. If Grandma wanted us to find that second will, then she had also left traps along the way. And somehow I knew those traps were meant for them. The drive to Grandma June's estate felt longer than ever before. Her house sat on the edge of Maple Creek, a quiet neighborhood where time seemed to have stopped somewhere around 1972. The old oak trees lining the street stretched overhead like watchful sentinels, and the white picket fences were chipped but proud, much like Grandma herself had been. As I turned down the familiar gravel path leading to her home, the afternoon sun dipped low, casting long, tired shadows across the porch. I parked behind Stephen's black SUV. They were already here. Of course they were. The three of them stood on the porch, arguing, their voices echoing into the air like the same tired melody of greed I'd grown up listening to. Jeremy paced near the steps, phone in hand, snapping photos like he was gathering evidence for some future dispute. Lila leaned against the railing, rolling her eyes at everything Stephen said. We're not breaking in, she insisted. Langford said the house isn't officially ours. Stephen snorted. The dog can't call the cops, Lila. And if the will says there's a clue here, then we're finding it. When I stepped out of the car, their arguing stopped. Jeremy turned to me, his smile tight. Well, look who decided to show up. Thought you'd let the greedy ones do the dirty work while you play saint. I ignored him and looked at the front door. Grandma's wind chime still hung there, a tiny silver dove that used to sing every time the wind passed through. Today it was silent. We're all here, I said. Let's just get this over with. Lila crossed her arms. You think the clue's actually real? I glanced at the door. If Grandma said she left something behind, it's real. And if she said only one of us deserves it, then she already knew how this would go. Stephen shoved the door open. The hinges groaned in protest, the same way they always had. The smell of rose potpourri and old wood greeted us, so familiar it almost hurt. Dust motes floated through the beams of sunlight that slipped past the curtains. The house hadn't changed, not even the ticking clock in the hallway that had been broken for years. Jeremy exhaled dramatically. All right, spread out. Check everything. Letters, drawers, anything that looks old or suspicious. Everything looks old, Lila muttered, stepping toward the kitchen. As they scattered, I stayed in the living room, standing beneath the painting Grandma had always loved, a portrait of her late husband, our grandfather, smiling with that gentle calm she never found again after he died. I remembered her sitting here, drinking tea, telling stories about how they met during a snowstorm in '58. He brought me soup and a shovel, she used to laugh. And I married him because he was the only man who didn't complain about my cooking. I ran my hand along the old piano by the window. Dust coated the keys, but one thing caught my eye. The middle key had a faint smear on it, cleaner than the rest. I pressed it. A hollow sound echoed inside the instrument. Frowning, I lifted the cover, expecting sheet music. Instead, I found an envelope wedged beneath the strings. "Hey!" Jeremy's voice cut through the air. "What are you doing?" I turned slowly, holding the envelope. "I found something." Lila appeared instantly. "Where?" "In the piano." Stephen rushed over, grabbing it from my hand before I could react. "Of course you did," he said with a smirk. "How convenient." He tore the envelope open before I could stop him. Inside was a folded sheet of paper with Grandma's handwriting. Jeremy leaned over his shoulder, reading aloud. "If you're reading this, it means you've started looking. Good. The real treasure isn't in the piano, but in the place where music meets silence, where love was kept alive even when no one listened." Lila frowned. "What does that even mean?" Jeremy groaned. "It means more riddles." "Fantastic. The old woman's lost her mind even after death." But I knew that line. "Where music meets silence," I whispered. "That's a music box." Stephen turned. "What?" "She had an old music box," I said, my voice trembling with memory. "It sat on her nightstand. It stopped playing years ago, but she never threw it away." Without waiting for permission, I headed upstairs. My footsteps echoed through the hallway, each one carrying me closer to the room I'd avoided since she died. The door to her bedroom was half open, and as I stepped inside, a wave of nostalgia hit me. The lavender perfume, the lace curtains, the creaky rocking chair by the window. Her nightstand stood exactly as she'd left it. I reached for the small porcelain music box on top. It was shaped like a heart, painted with tiny gold flowers. I turned the key on the bottom, expecting nothing, but to my shock it played. The melody was faint, fragile, but unmistakably alive. As it played, I noticed something strange. Beneath the lid, hidden inside the velvet lining, was a small brass key. Tied to it was a note. "The truth is locked where greed began." I felt the blood drain from my face. Behind me, footsteps thundered up the stairs. "Did you find something?" Stephen barked. I closed my hand around the key instinctively. "No, brimelit. Just the music box." Lila appeared beside him, glaring. "You're lying." "Am I?" I asked calmly, setting the box back on the table. "Then look, it's just an old song." They didn't believe me, but they didn't find anything either. As they turned to leave, I exhaled shakily and slipped the key into my pocket. That night, after they'd all gone, I returned alone. The house was quiet except for Winston's soft barking in the backyard. I walked through the dark halls with only a flashlight. The riddle echoed in my head, where greed began. Then it hit me. Grandma's safe. She kept it in her sewing room, hidden behind a false wall panel. Only she and I knew where it was. I knelt beside the panel, inserted the brass key, and turned. The lock clicked open. Inside was a small metal box. I lifted it carefully. My hands were shaking. I opened it and found a single flash drive. Attached to it was a note. "If they've all shown their true colors, play this for them together. Don't speak. Just watch." I stared at the flash drive, heart pounding. Whatever was on it wasn't meant for me alone. It was meant for all of us. Grandma June hadn't just left us a fortune. She'd left us a reckoning. The next morning, the storm broke early. Not the kind that falls from clouds, but the kind that brews in people. I woke to a string of messages from my cousins. Jeremy demanding answers, Lila threatening to lawyer up, and Stephen accusing me of hiding something. They were half right. I was hiding something, the small flash drive that now sat inside my desk drawer, wrapped in the same handkerchief Grandma used to carry in her purse. I hadn't dared to plug it in. Not yet, because I already knew, whatever was on it, it wasn't money she'd left us. It was punishment. Still, curiosity burns faster than fear. By noon, I decided it was time. I drove to the old house again, the flash drive clutched so tightly in my palm that the corners bit into my skin. I didn't even make it to the porch before I saw them, all three of them, waiting. Stephen leaned against the rail like a guard dog, Lila stood with her arms crossed, and Jeremy was pacing, phone in hand, expression coiled in irritation. Finally, Stephen said, eyes narrowing, "You've been ignoring us." "I needed time to think," I replied. "Think?" Lila snapped. "You mean time to hide whatever you found." Grandma said there was another document. We all heard it. "Don't act innocent." Jeremy stepped forward, his voice sharp. "We're not leaving until you show us." Part of me wanted to keep it to myself, to let them rot in their greed. But Grandma's note echoed in my mind. "Play this for them together. Don't speak. Just watch." "Fine, Grandma," I thought. "Let's finish what you started." "Inside," I said, holding up the flash drive. "You want to see this?" We gathered in the living room, the same place we'd sat as kids during Christmas mornings and long summers, waiting for Grandma's stories. The air now felt heavy, as if her ghost was perched on the piano watching us. I connected the flash drive to the old desktop computer she'd kept in her study. The screen flickered to life, then turned black. For a few seconds, there was only the hum of the CPU. Then she appeared. Grandma June, sitting in her floral armchair, Winston curled at her feet. Her eyes, even through the screen, had that fierce intelligence that used to make us straighten our backs when she looked our way. She smiled faintly. "If you're seeing this," she began, "then I can assume you've been fighting." "How predictable." Lila inhaled sharply. "I always knew greed would bring you all back under this roof," Grandma continued. "But I wanted to see how you'd come back. Whether it would be remorse that led you here, or hunger." Jeremy laughed nervously. "She's bluffing. This was recorded ages ago." But Grandma's next words silenced him. "Jeremy," she said. His smirk vanished. "You think I didn't know about the shell accounts? The ones you opened in my company's name? The accountant you bribed to cover your withdrawals? I let you keep your little charade because I wanted to see if guilt would make you fix it. It didn't, but I made sure the authorities will." Jeremy's face turned white. "What?" Grandma leaned forward on screen, her voice low and cold. "By the time you watch this, my lawyer will have sent evidence to the IRS. The inheritance you wanted? You'll be too busy explaining where it went." Stephen cursed under his breath, but Grandma's gaze shifted to him. "Stephen," she said sharply, "don't bother defending him. You have enough to answer for." His jaw tightened. "You stole from me too," she continued. "You borrowed money using my name, payday loans, credit cards, anything you could grab. I covered the debt quietly, not because I forgave you, but because I wanted you to see what silence costs. Now, the silence is over." Stephen's fists clenched. "This is insane. She can't." Grandma's voice cut him off. "The courts already have the documentation, dear. You'll be lucky if you have a car left when they're done." Lila let out a dry laugh. "Well, I guess I'm next." Grandma's expression softened slightly, but her tone stayed sharp. "Yes, Lila. You always were the actress. You used my name to climb social ladders, to get your designer contracts, to appear in circles you didn't belong to. You told everyone you were managing my charity funds. Do you know what happens when people check the books?" "I do. I hired someone to audit them 6 months before I died." Lila's jaw dropped. "You didn't." "Oh, I did," Grandma replied. "Every dollar you misplaced went to one of your little fashion trips. Consider that career over." Lila covered her mouth, her breathing shallow. Jeremy turned on me. "Did you know about this?" I shook my head slowly. "No. I told you, I found a flash drive last night." Grandma wasn't finished. Her tone shifted. Not gentler, just more deliberate. "And then there's you, Oliver." My heart skipped. "You sat there for years watching them tear this family apart. You stayed quiet, thinking silence made you good. But silence is complicity. I raised you to speak when no one else would. That's why I've given you one last job to do." She reached down and picked up a small silver envelope on the screen. "This contains the final document, the true will. It's hidden in this house, in the only place you ever dared to tell me the truth." She smiled faintly, almost sadly. "Find it, Oliver. Read it to them. Then leave this place. The rest will take care of itself." The screen went dark. No one spoke for several seconds. Then Stephen broke the silence. "She's bluffing," he muttered, though his voice wavered. "That video's old. She couldn't have sent anything." Jeremy turned to him, eyes wild. "You don't get it. If this is real, we're screwed. Lila stood, shaking her head. She can't ruin us from the grave. Can she? I didn't answer, because I knew Grandma June could, and she already had. While they argued, I quietly replayed her words in my head. The only place you ever dare to tell me the truth. And then it hit me. The garden. I was 14 the day I'd sat beside her under the rose arbor, crying because my father had left again. She'd told me, it's okay to tell the truth here. Nothing bad grows where truth is planted. I stood abruptly. I know where it is. Lila turned. What are you talking about? But I was already walking toward the door. Stay here, I said. I'll bring it to you. Outside, the evening light bled into gold. The garden was overgrown now, vines crawling up the trellis where we once sat. I knelt beside the rose arbor, brushing away leaves until my fingers hit something solid, metal. I dug carefully, and there it was, a tin box, tarnished but intact. Inside was a sealed envelope with my name written in her elegant cursive. I carried it back into the house. My cousins fell silent when they saw it. I opened the envelope slowly, unfolding the paper inside. To Oliver, my only grandchild who still knows how to listen. This is the true will. Read it aloud, and let them finally see what truth looks like. My throat tightened. I began to read. I, June Whitmore, hereby leave my estate, my fortune, and everything I own to Winston, my loyal dog, until the day Oliver decides to forgive you all. When he does, it becomes his. If he doesn't, it all goes to charity. Jeremy slammed his fist against the table. She can't do that. Oh, she already did, I said quietly. And as I folded the paper, I realized something else. Grandma's revenge wasn't just legal. It was personal. She left me holding their fate in my hands. And for the first time, I had no intention of saving them. The silence that followed the reading of the true will was suffocating. For a few seconds, no one moved, no one breathed, and even the hum of the old ceiling fan seemed to falter. Jeremy's jaw worked furiously, his mind visibly spinning between denial and rage. Lila's face turned pale, her manicured fingers trembling against the arm of the chair. Stephen just stared at me like I was the devil himself, his chest rising and falling with the kind of fury that came before something dangerous. She's insane, Jeremy finally muttered, his voice low and trembling. She's absolutely insane. You can't just. I cut him off. She can, Jeremy. And she did. It's all legal. Mr. Langford confirmed it. You're lying, Lila snapped. This is another trick. You're trying to make yourself look like the good one again. Grandma wouldn't do this to us. I folded the paper neatly and slid it back into the envelope. Then why does it sound exactly like her? Stephen slammed his fist onto the table, making Winston bark from the hallway. This is crap. We're not just going to sit here while you play puppet master with our lives. That house, that money, it belongs to all of us. I looked him dead in the eye. No, Esteban. It belongs to the only one who earned it. The one she trusted not to destroy everything she built. And guess what? That isn't you. He lunged across the table so fast I barely saw him move. His hand grabbed my collar, yanking me forward. Say that again, he hissed. His breath reeked of whiskey and desperation. Let him go, Lila snapped, though even she didn't sound sure whose side she was on. Jeremy stepped between us, not out of kindness, but calculation. Stop it, both of you, he said, straightening his shirt. If this is real, we can still find a way to fix it. We'll talk to Langford, file a petition, contest the will. Grandma can't legally give everything to a dog. She didn't, I said. She gave it to me, on one condition. Lila's eyes narrowed. And what's that? That I forgive you. Stephen laughed, a short, ugly sound. Then it's over. You'll never do that. He was right. I stood, slipping the envelope into my jacket pocket. You three made her last years miserable. You lied to her face, stole from her, mocked her. And now you're angry that she finally fought back? You should be grateful she didn't destroy you sooner. Jeremy's voice rose, desperate now. You think you're better than us? You think she loved you more? You're just her little errand boy, Oliver. The obedient one. The one too scared to take what he deserves. I turned toward the door. I'm not scared anymore. As I walked out, I could still hear them shouting, their voices blending into the same greedy cacophony Grandma had warned me about. I didn't look back. The sun was setting over the garden, painting the sky in streaks of gold and crimson, like the world itself was applauding her final act. That night, I stayed at a motel outside town. I couldn't sleep. Every word she'd recorded echoed through my mind. You stayed quiet too long, Oliver. Now you have the last word. Around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was Mr. Langford. I assume you found the document, he asked, his voice low and deliberate. I did, I said. They know everything now. He sighed softly. Then you also understand what she asked of you. I do, I said. And I'm not forgiving them. There was a pause. Then the estate transfers fully to Winston's trust, per her request. You'll be the sole executor. I figured as much. Oliver, he said gently. She wanted peace, even if it came through war. Don't let this consume you. But already had. The next morning I drove back to the estate, this time not out of obligation, but to finish what Grandma started. The house was quiet when I arrived. Winston wagged his tail in the doorway, as if expecting me. He led me straight to her study, the one room none of my cousins had dared to enter after the will reading. I sat at her desk, the air thick with dust and secrets. Her handwriting covered stacks of yellowed paper, notes, receipts, memories. But tucked beneath the blotter was something new, a small sealed letter with my name on it. My pulse quickened as I opened it. Oliver, I knew you'd come back here. Revenge is a heavy inheritance, but sometimes it's necessary to restore balance. They took kindness for weakness. They mistook love for silence. Now let them learn what silence sounds like when it's on the other side that you're the executor now. The estate, the accounts, the land, all under your control. Don't waste your energy fighting them in court. Just let the truth do its work. I left instructions with Langford for each of them. By the time they realize what's happening, it'll be too late to undo it. And when it's done, don't look back. Some victories are quiet for a reason. June. I folded the letter and exhaled slowly. She planned everything down to the last echo. 2 days later, it began. Jeremy's company accounts were frozen. His name appeared in local news for tax fraud investigations. Lila's brand partnerships were terminated after the audit revealed her embezzlement. Stephen's car was repossessed, his credit destroyed overnight. None of them knew that Grandma had set it all in motion long before her death. Timed, documented, and inevitable. But I knew. I was the executor. I watched it all unfold quietly, just as she told me to. When the last piece fell, when they finally called me one by one, begging for explanations, for forgiveness, I didn't answer. I just sat in her garden under the rose arbor, the evening breeze brushing past me like her hand once did, and whispered into the wind. Rest easy, Grandma. They're hearing the silence now. Winston barked softly beside me, and I swear, for a brief moment, I heard her laugh, low, proud, and satisfied. When people fall from grace, they never fall quietly. They claw, scream, and drag everyone around them into the pit. And that's exactly what my cousins did. By the end of that week, Grandma's revenge had fully taken shape, and I was watching it unfold like a storm through the windows of her old house. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about watching truth tear through lies that had been years in the making. Jeremy's downfall hit first. The IRS froze his accounts, his employees abandoned him, and his clients vanished overnight. His reputation, the polished image he'd built around being a family man and self-made entrepreneur, evaporated. He called me 3 times that day. I didn't answer. By the 4th call, he left a voicemail, his voice trembling, stripped of its arrogance. Oliver, please. I need to fix this. You know this isn't what Grandma wanted. We can work something out, right? You can tell him the truth. I'll pay you whatever you. I deleted the message before it finished. Lila's fall was uglier. The media caught wind of the audit Grandma had commissioned. Headlines screamed her name, fashion icon exposed in charity scandal. Her face, once plastered across magazines, became the centerpiece of every gossip blog in town. Her sponsors dropped her one by one. I saw a clip of her crying outside her penthouse, shouting at reporters, "My own grandmother set me up. You don't understand. It was supposed to be my brand." But Grandma did understand. That's why she'd done it. And then there was Stephen, the one who thought he could fight his way out of anything. He showed up at the estate 3 nights later, drunk, furious, and broken. His headlights tore through the fog as he stumbled out of his car, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Winston growled from the porch as Stephen yelled, "Oliver, I know you're in there." I stepped out, calm as the night itself. "You shouldn't have come." He staggered forward, his fists shaking. "You did this. You think you're some kind of hero? You think Grandma wanted this?" "No," I said quietly. "She wanted peace. You made war." He laughed bitterly, eyes glassy. "You always hid behind her skirts, playing the good grandson while we did the real work. Guess what? You're no different. You're just hiding behind a dead woman's will." I stepped closer, my voice low. "Maybe, but at least I'm not hiding from the truth." He shoved me. Hard. The gravel crunched beneath my shoes, but I didn't move back. "You're pathetic," he hissed. "You think this is revenge? You think you win because we're broke? You'll die alone in this rotten house with that mutt." I didn't respond. I just turned toward the door. "Leave, Stephen, before you make things worse." He glared at me for a long moment, then spat on the ground, muttering something under his breath before storming off. His car roared down the hill, disappearing into the night. I stood there until the sound faded. The next morning, I found out he'd been arrested for assaulting an officer during a bar fight. His mugshot was all over the news by noon. Grandma's last chess piece had fallen. Still, it didn't feel like victory. I spent that evening in her study, reading through her old journals. I wanted to understand why she'd gone to such lengths, why she'd set such an elaborate trap for her own blood. I found the answer in a single entry written a few months before she died. "I raised them all wrong. I gave too much, too easily. I thought generosity would teach them love, but all it did was feed their hunger. Oliver is the only one who still listens. Maybe that's why he must learn this lesson too. That kindness without boundaries isn't love. It's weakness. I want him to see that mercy sometimes is letting the guilty choke on their own greed." I closed the journal, a chill running through me. She hadn't just punished them. She'd been teaching me. Every step of this ordeal, every word in that will, was as much about shaping me as it was about destroying them. By the end of that week, their worlds had crumbled completely. Jeremy's assets were seized, and he'd fled the city under investigation. Lila filed for bankruptcy. Stephen sat in county jail, denied bail. None of them had anyone left to call. And yet, despite all of that, I couldn't shake the heaviness in my chest. Revenge was satisfying, but it wasn't quiet. It echoed. It lingered in the halls like Grandma's perfume, sweet but suffocating. One night, as rain pattered against the windows, I found myself sitting under the rose arbor again. Winston lay at my feet, his head on my shoe. I looked up at the stars breaking through the clouds and whispered, "It's done, Grandma. They've all paid." A soft breeze rustled the roses, and for a fleeting moment, I almost thought I heard her voice. Not yet. The next morning, a letter arrived from Mr. Langford. Hand-delivered. The envelope was sealed with Grandma's old wax stamp, the one with the W shaped like a crown. My heart pounded as I broke it open. Inside was a single page. "Oliver, by now, they've all faced the weight of their sins. But there's one more step. I didn't build this fortune to rot in court or charity accounts. You know what to do with it. The trust papers on my desk will explain everything. When you're done, invite them back one last time. Let them see what true inheritance means. June." I set the letter down slowly. Grandma wasn't done yet, and neither was I. The invitation went out on a gray Tuesday morning, handwritten, sealed in thick ivory envelopes, and sent through certified mail, just the way Grandma June would have done it. Each one carried the same message. "You are requested to return to the Whitmore estate for the final reading of supplemental documents related to the estate of the late June Whitmore. Attendance is mandatory." I signed each envelope myself. One for Jeremy, one for Lila, one for Stephen. As I slid them into the post slot at the local office, a strange calm settled over me. Not satisfaction exactly, but completion. Grandma had wanted them to come back one last time, and I would make sure her final act played out exactly as she intended. The house waited like a stage. I spent the next 3 days preparing it, dusting furniture, polishing the floors and opening all the curtains so the afternoon light would pour through the tall windows. Every echo in that house reminded me of the years we'd spent there together. The laughter, the lies, the whispered conversations Grandma must have overheard when we thought she was asleep. On the fourth day, they arrived. Jeremy was first, wearing the same desperate arrogance that had become his only suit. He looked thinner, pale, his once slick hair now unruly. He didn't shake my hand. He just muttered, "Let's get this over with." Lila came next, her confidence cracked beyond repair. She wore dark sunglasses, even though the sky was overcast, her designer coat wrinkled. "I shouldn't even be here," she said coldly. "My lawyer advised against it." Stephen arrived last, driven by a friend because his license had been suspended. He said nothing as he entered, just glared, jaw clenched, eyes full of that same bitterness that had always defined him. We gathered in the living room, where the fire crackled quietly in the old brick hearth. Winston lay curled beside my chair, calm but alert, like he knew this moment was sacred. "Thank you for coming," I began. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "This won't take long." Grandma left one final instruction, a demonstration of what she called true inheritance. Jeremy scoffed. "You dragged us here for another one of her games?" Lila's voice wavered. "Oliver, if this is another trap." "It's not a trap," I said, pulling a small wooden box from under the table. "It's a lesson." Their eyes followed the box as I placed it gently before me. It was old, mahogany with iron hinges, and etched with the same W crest that marked Grandma's seal. I unlocked it with a brass key she'd left me in her desk. Inside, wrapped in linen, were 3 smaller envelopes. Each one had a name written on it: Jeremy, Lila, and Stephen. I handed them out in silence. They exchanged uncertain glances before opening them. Each envelope contained a single folded sheet and a check. Jeremy spoke first. "This can't be right." His face had gone pale again. "This says 50,000. Lila's voice shook. "Mine too." Stephen looked down at his paper and cursed under his breath. "You're kidding me. After everything, this?" I waited until they all looked at me. She called it forgiveness money. Jeremy frowned. "Forgiveness for what?" "For humiliating us. For saving you," I said quietly. "You think she destroyed you, but all she did was make sure you couldn't destroy anyone else. Those checks are from her personal fund, a fraction of what you cost her. She wanted you to have just enough to start over, but not enough to forget why you fell." Stephen crumpled the paper in his fist. "She hated us." "No," I said. "She loved you too much to let you keep being who you were." Lila's sunglasses slid slightly, revealing eyes red from sleepless nights. "And what about you, Oliver? What did she leave you?" I reached in a box again and pulled out one more envelope. It bore no name, just a single word written in Grandma's perfect cursive: choice. Inside was a key, the one to her safe deposit box downtown, and another letter. I opened it and read aloud. "Oliver, the wealth I built isn't a reward. It's a burden. You've seen what greed can do to blood. You can keep it and carry that weight, or you can use it to end the Whitmore name as a synonym for selfishness. If you choose the latter, go to the bank, open the vault, and follow the instructions inside. You'll know what to do." For a moment, the manager recognized the seal immediately and escorted me to the private vault. Inside was a single black binder with the words "Legacy Trust, Final Directive" embossed on the cover. I opened it. Inside was a signed legal document transferring the entire Whitmore estate, investments, and remaining assets, totaling $4.3 million, to a foundation named the Winston Trust for Lost Causes. Beneath that, in Grandma's handwriting, "Let those who lost themselves to greed fund those who've lost everything else. That is my true will." I smiled, not the kind of smile that came from victory, but from finally understanding the genius of her design. She hadn't left the money to me, to Winston, or to them. She'd left it to the world, to the people who'd never had a chance. By the time the news broke that the Whitmore estate had been donated entirely to charity, my cousins were already too numb to react. They called me, left voicemails full of fury and disbelief. I didn't answer any of them. I just sat in Grandma's garden that night, Winston beside me, listening to the wind moving through the roses. She'd done it. She turned our family's greed into a legacy of generosity, and I'd been the final instrument of her revenge. Her voice echoed faintly in my mind. Some victories are quiet, Oliver. And in that silence, I realized hers was the loudest of all. When the story broke, it wasn't just news, it was an earthquake. The Whitmore name, once synonymous with wealth, status, and quiet power, was dragged through every headline and talk show across the country. Heiress leaves entire family penniless. The dog, the will, and the revenge. Greed runs in the Whitmore bloodline. Grandma June had finally made her point, not in whispers, but in headlines bold enough to outlive us all. The Foundation's public launch went viral. The Winston Trust for Lost Causes was introduced as a charity dedicated to helping families destroyed by financial fraud and greed. A poetic mirror of our own story. The press release quoted a line straight from Grandma's letter. The Whitmore fortune was built by hands that once knew hunger. It will now feed those who still do. It was brutal, beautiful, and devastating all at once. Jeremy's voice message arrived the next morning, one long, desperate rant that started with threats and ended with sobs. "You ruined us," he cried. "You and that damn woman. She used you as her weapon, and now we're done for." Do you think she'd be proud of this? Watching her family humiliated, I didn't delete it this time. I listened, not out of pity, but because it was the sound of Grandma's justice working. She hadn't just punished him. She'd forced him to face the echo of his own choices. By midweek, Lila's collapse was plastered across every news site. Her brand was gone, her penthouse auctioned off. She posted one final message online before deleting all her accounts. If love is supposed to be unconditional, then why did ours have a price tag? It went viral for a day, not because people pitied her, but because they saw their own families reflected in her words. For the first time, Lila became relatable, not glamorous, not untouchable, but tragically human. Stephen's spiral came next. His bail was denied again. Photos of him leaving the courthouse in cuffs were everywhere. I saw one headline that made me pause. Former heir cries out, "It wasn't supposed to be like this." No, I thought quietly it wasn't. But it had to be. Grandma's plan hadn't just been vengeance. It had been a reckoning designed to leave scars deep enough to teach. She once told me that some people only learn when life takes everything they worship. I never understood that until now. The Whitmore mansion became the Foundation's headquarters. Lawyers and volunteers replaced the hollow laughter that used to fill the halls. The portraits of our ancestors, men and women who'd built an empire out of old money and newer lies, were taken down and stored away. The plaque by the front door now read, "The Whitmore Estate, gifted in full to the Winston Trust, 2025. When I saw it, I felt something strange, not pride, not guilt, just peace. One evening, I returned to the house for the last time before moving on. Winston padded beside me as I walked through each room. The piano where I'd found the first clue, the study where her journals still rested, the garden where everything had begun. I stopped under the rose arbor, the same spot where Grandma and I had planted truth all those years ago. The Foundation team had left for the night. The air was still. The roses swayed in the light wind, whispering secrets only she and I would ever understand. I sat down on the old bench, running my hand across the wood. That's when I noticed it, a small brass plate I hadn't seen before, screwed into the backrest. I leaned closer. Engraved on it were her words. To Oliver, the only one who listened. My chest tightened. Beneath it, in smaller letters, "Forgiveness isn't about freeing them. It's about freeing yourself." For a long time, I sat there in silence. I thought about everything, the deceit, the unraveling, the screaming matches, the letters, the recordings. And in that moment, for the first time since she died, I realized she hadn't wanted me to destroy them. She'd wanted me to finish what she couldn't, to bring an end to the rot that had infected our bloodline. And yet, her last words to me, her final lesson, weren't about revenge at all. They were about release. That night, I went home and opened a new notebook. At the top of the first page, I wrote, "The rise and fall of the Whitmores, a true story of greed, blood, and truth. Not for fame, not for money, but because some stories are warnings disguised as history. 3 weeks later, I mailed the manuscript to a publisher. I didn't expect anything to come of it. But when it did, and when the world started reading about how greed can turn family into enemies, I knew Grandma's voice had finally reached beyond our walls. The Whitmore legacy was no longer measured in dollars. It was measured in lessons, written in ink, sealed in scandal, and paid for in blood. And as for Winston, the last living heir of Grandma's heart, he spent his days in the garden, sleeping by the roses. Every morning, I'd visit him, pour a cup of tea, and whisper, "We did it, old boy. She can rest now." Because she had won, because I had learned, because the world had listened. By late spring, the house no longer felt like a place of sorrow. The Winston Trust had restored the estate's walls, the gardens, even the greenhouse that had once fallen into ruin. Children visited on weekends now, kids from shelters, schools, and struggling families who came to learn gardening and animal care. Seeing them run through the yard filled something in me I didn't know was empty. Grandma's home had been reborn, not as a monument to wealth, but as a cradle for hope. And yet, even in that new life, she was still there. I could feel her everywhere, in the scent of roses carried by the morning breeze, in the faint echo of laughter when I walked past the old parlor, in Winston's sudden pauses, as though he saw her before I did. Some nights I'd sit under the arbor long after sunset, and the shadows would move in ways that felt intentional, like they were listening. The first time I heard her voice, it was a whisper, so soft I thought I'd imagined it. I was trimming the roses, the same ones she'd tended every Saturday morning without fail. The wind rustled the petals, and beneath that gentle sound, something familiar spoke my name. "Oliver." I froze, pruning shears suspended midair. The whisper was faint but unmistakable. My heart pounded. I turned slowly toward the bench, half expecting to see her sitting there with her sun hat and gloves, scolding me for cutting too close to the stem. Of course, no one was there. Only Winston, staring at the same empty space, ears perked. I set the shears down and took a deep breath. "You'd love what this place has become," I said quietly. "It's finally what you wanted, Grandma." The breeze answered by lifting a few petals off the ground, spinning them into the air before setting them gently on the bench. I smiled through the tightness in my chest. "I hope that's your way of saying you agree." That night, I couldn't sleep. I dreamed of her house, not as it was now, but as it used to be. The walls were cracked, the lights flickered, and the garden was full of whispering voices. In the dream, I followed the sound of her laughter down the hall to her study. There, on her old writing desk, was another sealed letter, glowing faintly under the lamplight. My hand shook as I reached for it. When I opened it, there was only one line written inside. "You still don't know everything, my boy." I woke drenched in sweat, the echo of her voice still ringing in my ears. The next morning, I went straight to the study. I'd gone through every drawer in that room before, every ledger and file, every hidden compartment, but the dream had been too vivid to ignore. I started from scratch, moving the desk away from the wall. And that's when I saw it. Behind the baseboard, tucked neatly into a small hollow, was a tiny tin box. Dust-covered, but perfectly preserved. My hands trembled as I pulled it free and placed it on the desk. Inside were two items: an old cassette tape labeled "For Oliver" after the silence, and a folded note written in her familiar looping script. If you're hearing this, then you've done everything I asked. But before you close this chapter, I want you to understand why I did it all. I set the note aside and found the only cassette player left in the house. An old portable one that still smelled faintly of tobacco and lavender. I slid the tape in, pressed play, and waited. Her voice filled the room. "Hello, sweetheart," she began, her tone soft, almost playful. "If this is playing, then you've proven me right again. You were always the one who stayed curious. The others, they thought money was the story. It never was. The story was you." I leaned back in the chair, my chest tight. I didn't want revenge, Oliver. Not really. I wanted clarity. I wanted the world to know what happens when love becomes currency. Every lesson I left behind was for them to learn and for you to witness. Because you needed to see it to understand the cost of silence and to choose what kind of man you'd become after. Her voice faltered slightly, a rare tremor of emotion. But there's something I never told you. I wasn't the only one behind all this. Your grandfather helped me build this plan long before he died. He knew our family's greed would eat itself alive one day, and he made me promise to end it before it reached you. I blinked, my throat tightening. You carry both of us in you, Oliver. His patience, my fire. That's why you were the one chosen to finish what we started. You're the balance, the bridge between what destroyed us and what can rebuild. The tape clicked softly as if she'd paused to breathe. Then came her final words, spoken with that warmth that had once anchored my entire world. So, my dear boy, don't mourn the past. Rewrite it. Make the Whitmore name mean something again. Not in dollars, in deeds. Because one day, someone will ask who we were. And I want them to say, we learned. The tape ended with a faint rustle, the sound of her setting it down beside the recorder, and then a whisper so soft I almost missed it. I'm proud of you. I sat there for a long time, staring at the silent machine, tears blurring the edges of the desk. She had been planning this not just for years, but for generations. The garden, the will, even the dog, all of it had been part of a story that began long before I understood it. As the afternoon light slanted through the window, Winston wandered over and placed his head on my knee. I stroked his fur, whispering, "We'll make her proud, old boy." Outside, the roses rustled again, and for a fleeting moment, I saw it. Her silhouette near the arbor, hat tilted, her gloved hand brushing the petals as she walked away into the fading light. I didn't chase it. I just smiled and whispered, "Goodbye, Grandma." Because I finally understood, ghosts don't always linger to haunt. Sometimes, they stay just long enough to guide you home. Spring rolled into summer, and with it came the quiet kind of peace that only time and truth can build. The Winston Trust was flourishing. Schools, shelters, and struggling families across the state were now being helped by funds that once divided ours. Grandma June's vision had come alive in every new garden we planted, every scholarship we granted, every single meal served to someone who'd lost hope. Her story, once a secret locked behind greed and deception, had become a living act of grace. I was no longer the haunted heir of a cursed family name. I was simply Oliver Whitmore, caretaker, storyteller, and as some call me in the papers, the grandson who changed the ending. Every morning, I'd still visit the garden, her garden. Winston, now older and slower, followed me faithfully, lying beneath the bench while I watered the roses. The plaque on the bench caught the sunlight each day, gleaming like new despite the months gone by. To Oliver, the only one who listened. It always made me smile. But that morning, something felt different. A letter had arrived the night before, not from the foundation or the lawyers, but from a publishing house in New York. They'd read my manuscript, The Rise and Fall of the Whitmores, and wanted to publish it as a memoir. I'd hesitated before opening their offer. I didn't write it for fame or money or to rebuild a legacy in my name. I wrote it so people could see what love looks like when tested and what truth sounds like when spoken too late. But as I sat there that morning, the smell of roses heavy in the air, I realized something. Grandma hadn't built her revenge to stay hidden. She'd built it to teach, and it was time the world learned. I accepted the offer that afternoon. The book came out 3 months later, and to my surprise, it became more than a success. It became a mirror for others. I received letters from readers who saw themselves in our story. A betrayed son forgiving his mother, a sister apologizing after years of silence, a father leaving behind greed for goodness. People began quoting Grandma's words on social media, in classrooms, even in churches. Some victories are quiet, but they echo for generations. Every time I read that line, I could almost hear her voice again, proud, teasing, eternal. Months passed. Life found rhythm again. The house became a refuge for the lost and broken. I hosted community dinners under the rose arbor, where laughter replaced bitterness and forgiveness grew wild like ivy. People said the estate felt alive, like the spirit of its owner still walked its halls. I believed them. One evening, as the sun melted into gold and the garden glowed like it was made of fire, I noticed a single rose swaying differently from the rest. It was fuller, redder, untouched by the season's decay. I leaned closer, and there, tied delicately around its stem, was a thin, silver ribbon. My heart stopped. I'd never seen it before. Attached to it was a tiny paper tag, faded and soft with time. I untied it carefully. In Grandma's unmistakable handwriting, it read, "The last petal never falls, Oliver. It blooms again for those who listen." I laughed softly through the tears that came without warning. "You're still talking to me, huh?" I whispered. Winston barked once. A deep, knowing sound that echoed through the garden. I looked up at the sky. The stars were just beginning to pierce the dusk, and for a moment, I swore I saw her again, just a faint shimmer of light near the arbor, turning toward me with that same proud smile. Then, like the last note of a song, she was gone. But I wasn't sad. Not anymore, because I finally understood. Grandma hadn't left me haunted. She'd left me guided. The dog, the roses, the riddles, the recordings, all of it had been her way of making sure I didn't just inherit her wealth, but her wisdom. That night, I walked back to the house, turned off the lights, and whispered into the stillness, "Rest easy, Grandma. The world knows your story now, and it's still blooming." Winston barked once more, as if to agree, before curling up at my feet. The wind moved gently through the roses, carrying a scent that felt like her laughter. And under the moonlight, one final petal fell, landing softly beside Winston's paw. It didn't wither. It shimmered. Thank you for listening to Grandma Left Everything to the Dog, until the lawyer read the real will. If this story touched your heart, reminded you of family, or made you think about what truly matters, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Your support keeps these stories alive. Stories of truth, love, and the kind of revenge that teaches us what it means to forgive.